welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Bethanyyy S.J. I'm a student currently studying International Relations at Africa University. So today we're going to be talking about, can the African Union Agenda 2063 on continental and regional integration be achieved realistically? Firstly, we want to understand what does developmental agenda refers. So developmental agenda refers to a set of priorities or goals or maybe plans aimed at fostering social, economical, and also environmental progress in a specific context, area, or maybe a continent at large. Then we now want to understand what does the African Union Agenda 2063 refers to. So Agenda 2063 refers to a framework formulated with the aim or the purpose of guiding Africa's development over a progress of 50 years. Now that we have understand what the framework or the agenda refers, we now want to understand the aims of the framework. So firstly, the first aim of the framework is aimed at a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and also sustainable development. The second one is aimed at continental and regional integration amongst African states. Then the third one is aimed at Africa's good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, and also rule of law. Then the fourth one is aimed at a peaceful Africa and secure Africa as well. The fifth one is aimed at Africa's strong cultural identity, values, and ethics. Then the sixth one is aimed at advancing Africa as a global player and partner in the international arena. Now that we have understood the aims of the Agenda 2063, I'm now going to specifically focus on one aim of it, and that is the continental and regional integration. We now want to understand how the African states or how Africa at large is now making progress towards this agenda. So first in line, we can see that Africa is making a progress in continental and regional integration through its trading sector. For the trading sector, years before the formation of the African Free Trade Continental Area, there had been trading disputes and also trading imbalances. But now that AfCFTA is now in place, we can now see that trading amongst African states is now peaceful and also it's now proper. Why is it so? Because the AfCFTA managed to introduce trading without barriers, and also it also allowed that trading amongst nation states shouldn't be too much excessive towards an economy of one state. Then the other way they are making progress is through the creation of regional blocks. Years before, there had not been any regional blocks, but now there has been the formation of a lot of regional blocks, SADC, ECOWAS, to mention a few. These regional blocks play a major role in assuring the state's peace and also maintaining correlateral relations amongst the nation states, because African Union is there. However, it cannot manage over a regional dispute. That's where this regional blocks comes in place. They are there to monitor the relationships of its neighboring states, because one wrong move of one nation state can affect the internal issues of another nation state. With that in place, we can refer to the example of DRC. The ongoing issues which are occurring in DRC have been straining towards the nation states among its DRC because there is now high rates of internally displaced persons. So these internally displaced persons are now seeking refuge towards neighboring states, and sometimes it can be a very defective issue to those neighboring states, because economically speaking, they cannot finance for more refugees who are seeking asylum in their states. So sometimes it can be economically restraining, and also in other times it can be a very economic disaster towards DRC itself, because it will be losing a lot of its manpower. So now that we have understood what progress is being made towards this agenda, we now want to look at the issues which are affecting this agenda in place. First in line is the peace and security. As I had mentioned before, in DRC, right, the ongoing crisis, it has been affecting its neighboring states. Now, with the neighboring states being affected with it, it then causes tension among these nation states, because another state would tighten its borders in order to curb the movement of people. To the sending nation, it would seem like it's abandoning this nation states. These nation states are abandoning the state itself, or they are now going against the issue of assisting other people who need humanitarian assistance. So that is a huge hindrance towards this towards this agenda at large. And also we can look at the issue of M23 rebel groups. They're the ones who are inflicting conflict within DRC itself. It then shows how nation states are maybe realistic in nature, in which they want to obtain the resources of another nation states at the expense of lives and loss of people. Then we now want to look at the issue of humanitarian crisis. With humanitarian crisis, we then have to understand that with issues like political instability within a nation, it often results in humanitarian crisis, which violates humanitarian law, and it somewhat causes a hindrance in regional integration, as some nation states who don't want to partner up with states which go against humanitarian laws. We then look at the issue of Mozambique. Mozambique last year, its post-elections violence, which resulted in the loss of many lives. The government in day was rallied and also protested against the people within the country. However, the response which was given by the army and also the government in place was somewhat suppressive in nature. The other neighboring states like Zimbabwe, South Africa, and the electoral body of SADC, they tried to speak up towards this inhumane nature. However, Mozambique governance of the day repressed those matters and decided to be authoritative in nature, which somewhat might hinder the relationship in which Mozambique has with its neighboring states, as some states wouldn't want to partner with the government of the day, as I feel like the government of the day was authoritative and also greedy in somewhat nature, as it might have tampered with its electoral votes in order to attain power. Then we have to understand the issue of government and institutional weaknesses. Some governments of the day and institutions at large have their own weaknesses. We can look at some corrupt governances, like for the sake of Mozambique, Zimbabwe as well. These governments have been very corrupt, in a sense that some of them, they loot a lot of money which are aimed at fostering development within their country. They are looting the money and having huge expenditure. And using the money for their own personal benefit. This then results in these states losing sponsors and also partners, as there will be no state who would want to partner with a very greedy leader or a corrupt leader in nature. So the corruptness can somewhat result in a state losing a lot of state fundings and state sponsors, as they would be very greedy in nature. Now that we have understood the issues affecting the developmental agenda of continental and regional integration, we want now to discuss, are there any efforts that could be done or that could be made in order to improve the continental and regional integration among states? Why not? We do have like possible solutions. The first one is through strengthening government and its institution. This could be through the anti-corruption. I know some African states, they have the anti-corruption. However, its functionality is questionable. We want those anti-corruption to be very functional in states, so that there will be no issues of looting, and also the state funds are being used properly. And there's a limitation to where people in power could overreach or encroach their authority into the state funds. Then the other point is through investing human capital. I know that through continental and regional integration, people have been overly dependent on trading. However, what if a state invests in its own people, its own capital, through these informal sectors? Now people, they are now seeking entrepreneurship. What if the state pour its funds into that? There's uniqueness in basketry, in weave making, in cloth manufacturing. Those things, they could be made in bulk, then traded to other neighboring states. And that Africanization could continue, in which now African states, they don't have to be overly dependent towards importing goods from Western countries or Asian countries. Then there's also the need for infrastructure development. As a state or as African nations at large, they now need to invest in its digital infrastructure. Why is it so? The world is slowly evolving towards digitalization. However, as Africa, we are still lacking in that area. We are still overly depending over manufactured goods from other states, from other Western states, not something which is made within Africa. And we don't really know the liability of this gadget in which we use. However, we would feel comfortable if it is something that is made, locally made within Africa, that we would know that this is a blueprint that's coming out of Africa. Africa doesn't lack resources. However, it lacks that innovativeness in which they lack to execute this developmental thing. With that said, I do believe that most of these things do apply at a very large scale and also help in fostering this continental and regional integration within African states, and also push for the agenda of Agenda 2063 in the African states. I do hope that this video was very insightful and you managed to grasp one or three things, and feel free to express your thoughts on this topic and also your views. And if there are any errors, I do appreciate you pointing them out to me, as this is a free space and a learning area. But thank you for watching, and do not forget to subscribe. Thank you.